This is a message to the so-called president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. My anger is not just accumulated on the so-called president-elect called Bola Ahmed Tinubu, but my anger is mainly on the so-called military commander-in-chief and to every other law enforcement, including all the magistrate high court, federal high court, from the legislative, judiciary, and to the so-called executive of Nigeria. Big shame, big shame, big shame, shame on all of you who doesn't even have one single shame or sense at all in every ramification of a nationhood. For not crying out loud, nationhood is defined as the fact or status of being a nation with a national identity, of being independent. Okay, what do we even mean when we say that we are independent? To be independent is to be contented with all we have that makes us who we are. To be independent, we need to be independent with our hospital. We need to be independent with enforcement of our national orientation and laws. We need to be independent with our educations, creativity on national industrialization. We need to be independent with our educations, creativity on national industrialization. We need to be independent with our constitution and invention of technologies nationally. That makes us independent when we say that we are independent. We need to be independent with our national value and policy without any other nation having the right to intrude. But in Nigeria, we are not seeing this thing coming to performance. My anger is that why would or should the so-called president-elect of a country shamelessly travel out of his own country for a medical treatment in another country abroad, in England, to be precise, and his own country called Nigeria, of a 36 state and capital? Man, it's a shame. Okay, if that is not enough, why not in an other African country? Why shouldn't Bola Ahmed Tinubu be taken to another African country? We have 54 countries in Africa. So he could not travel to one of these African countries. Don't we think Don't we think don't we think maybe something is really going on with these shameless African leaders, all these futile we have as political leaders or politicians? What we have in Africa is political idiocy. That is all we have in Africa. My anger is that I haven't seen or hear the commander-in-chief of armed forces condemning such act, which is supposed to be against the law of the country, for a whole president, a whole number one man of a country, to travel out of his own country for treatment, for medical treatment. It's a big shame. It's a big shame. It's a big shame. It's a big shame. I repeat, my anger is that I haven't seen or hear the commander-in-chief of armed forces condemning such acts. It's a shame, really, for a president, the so-called president-elect, who hasn't yet become a president, traveling to England for medical treatment. This is a man that people are parading, saying that he makes Lagos what it is. Okay, now we have 36 states and capital in Nigeria, and there is no hospital, there is no standard hospital that a president-elect should be taken to for a treatment. Then how do we defend slavery? How do we, as an African, sometimes, how do we defend slavery? What do we understand to be slavery? Must you be chained, or must your leg be tied before you know that you are a slave? Does the military we have in Nigeria, in all the African countries, do they even have any studies in their brain? Do they think? Do they compare? Sometimes the military will compare to other countries. How is the movement of other countries? How is the standard of other countries? The military we have in Africa, do they even sometimes compare to see what is going on in other countries? Why is that Africa is always backward? Why is Nigeria as a country pushing Africa backward? We have military who does not even know the meaning of military, don't even know their left and right, who are not even kicking against slavery. For not crying out loud, military in a country or in a state are to kick against anything oppression, anything injustice. Be you president or be you citizen, be you whatever anything you are, the military is there to stop any injustice, any act of injustice, which this presidential candidate traveling out of his own country, then which example is he showing to the governors, to the ministers, to the senators, or to the citizens? What is the example that the president is showing? This is a country where they newly discovered lithium. This is a country where you have petroleum. This is a country where you have gold, diamond, and everything. So what are this money meant for? Why can't this money be used to build hospital, for God's sake? In the whole 36 state and capital, we could not have even one single hospital that the president could be treated. It's a shame to the military head of state. It's a shame to all the so-called magistrates, legislative and executive that we have in Nigeria. It's a big shame. You people are just a bunch of disgrace. Very futile set of people. Very futile set of people. My anger is that I haven't see or hear the commander-in-chief of armed forces condemning such act for a president-elect to travel out of his country for a treatment. It's a big shame, which is supposed to be against the law of the country, for a whole president to travel out of his own country for treatment. Because a place of medical treatment is supposed to be the first disposition as a fundamental human right of every citizen, not to talk about the president himself traveling out for a medical treatment. And the so-called High Court of Justice remains silent on condemning such foolish attitude. The military remains silent on condemning such attitude. Man, it's a shame. The police remain silent in condemning such attitude. The futile journalists and news broadcasters, they remain silent on calling Bola Ahmed Tinubu for resignation. I repeat, it's a very big shame to all the law enforcement. It is a shame to all the high magistrates. It is a shame to the Federal High Court. It is a shame to all the governors. It is a shame to all the futile ministers and senators, both the past and the present, for constituting the act of highest slavery. It is a shame to all the professors in every part of Africa, home and abroad, that the so-called country representing the giant of Africa doesn't have a medical center where the so-called country politicians can be treated, the so-called leaders could be treated. Then how could the citizen survive if the so-called people parading themselves to be leaders of a country could not have a place of medical treatment in the country? Then how could the citizen survive? Then we don't know the meaning of slavery. Shame to all the parliament, shame to the parliament of all African countries. Shameless politicians. Highest slavery. The African ancestors are really angry for this attitude. They say Nigeria is not an African language. Listen carefully. Nigeria is not an African language. Nigeria is not a native name. And Nigerians are native people. Nigerians are African people. Nigeria are cultural people. See, Africans are suffering today, it's because of Nigeria. Africans are being discriminated today, it is because of Nigeria. Africans are in the prison all over the globe, all over the world today, in every countries, it is because of Nigeria. White supremacy created Nigeria. Africans are dying of poverty today because of exploitation of African natural resources. It's because of Nigeria. The disrespectation of Africans today, it is because of Nigeria. The shame bestowed on all Africans from the Europeans, Asians, Americans, etc., it is because of Nigeria. Shame on the Nigeria politicians. Nigeria is a very big disappointment to the whole continent of Africa. My urge to all African countries, nations, is to rise and stand tall above Nigeria. Nigeria is not qualified to be the giant of Africa, because they are not standing their right to be the giant of Africa. There are too many other African countries who are supposed to stand the right to be the giant of Africa, who could stand for Africans' rights home and abroad, and Nigerians are being placed there to weaken those strengths. The African countries that are buoyant enough to stand the right of Africa, both home and abroad, but the British saw that the Nigerian politicians are so illiterate that they could be manipulated. That's why they use them to suppress the military power in every other African country. And it must be put to an end. Nigeria as a country has failed Africa. Nigeria has betrayed Africa. Nigeria are living like they are being sold Africans are living like they are being sold. It is because of the country called Nigeria. French countries in Africa cannot manufacture their own money. They cannot mine their own gold. They cannot mine their own resources. They cannot refine their own petroleum or utilize their own resources today. It is because of Nigeria. What a shame. What a shame. A country where the whole president could not be treated in his own country. This is a country where we have 36 states and capital. So among all the 36 states and capital, there could not be just even one hospital where a president could be treated. And we say then Nigeria is not yet qualified to be a country, because a country is supposed to be independent of all ramifications that makes a country. How many European leader is coming to Africa for treatment? Does the British Prime Minister come to Africa for treatment? Then what permits the right of African leaders to be going to England for treatment? This is to show that the military is the corruption that we have in Africa, because the military is supposed to kick against this kind of attitude. Okay, now let's assume now, for example, the England authorities declare in their hospital that the Nigeria president should be injected or should be killed. Then the military will start to rise and start to create commotion. Okay, now before the commotion, why couldn't the military come out and say, why should the president leave his country for medical treatment? And being there, who knows the document that will be brought to him to sign? Blaspheming to be a medical treatment document. This is all the stupidity that is called slavery that Africans are suffering of, because we have shameless leaders who are not ashamed. Okay, now for example, now more your talk. Now may I speak language in Nigeria the year. Now for example, now as Bola Ahmed Tinubu dey hospital for England now, then this England where they claim say na dem colonize Nigeria. Okay, now they can't bring any paper now. Bring paper now say okay, so resources they call canal for so year. They give them in form of medical treatment paper. You go sign, and okay, now you know where I want to know document where they sign. Okay, for example, now England, now just imagine now England, why okay our key president now they just give an injunction now, president or your die, and so they just take key a whole representative of the whole country. So sometimes our military, I don't know whether, because 90% of people who join soldier for Nigeria, many of them they're not educated, they are not revolutionaries. This is why Africans are suffering on a daily basis, because we have illiterate who go into military who are not revolutionary, who does not go into military because they are hungry that their parents are not being paid pension. We don't have people who go into military because they see that Nigeria have all the resources, but the people are suffering. We don't have this military who go because of this motive. We just have those who go into the military because they want to take off the uniform to go and oppress fearful citizens. Because the citizen who does not know their right, who does not know that a military is supposed to protect a territory, not to come into a city to disturb, to cause nuisance. Military does not have a right to come into the city to constitute nuisance. They are there to protect the territory, to protect any invasion of any other country from any other country. This is the function, the fundamentals of military. Not in Nigeria where we have military who common person could just have 20,000 naira and use 10,000 to go and take military from the barrack to go and oppress people. This is why the military we have in Nigeria does not even know the fundamental human right, does not even know what to do when the president is misbehaving. If a president should travel out of his country for a medical treatment, that president is equivalent to be overthrown. The president is equivalent to be overthrown because he has gone against the constitutional right.